You've shared a bit of your personal story in terms of Iran today to justify your position. Do you want to explain?
Yes, I mean, firstly, the whole main question about being grateful. Firstly, all of us have to be grateful, regardless of, in terms of the country that we're in, whether you're a white English Brit or someone who was born somewhere else or not. That's my main issue, firstly, because I understand fully, before we start this debate, that Nazanin went through a tough personal trauma, something that my family and I went through. Obviously, I was born in Iran, and I've been detained for believing in liberty. They made my mum's life miserable until this country gave her a fresh chance, and that's why I am massively grateful for Her Majesty's United Kingdom every single day. The main point of this issue is that it's not really, I'm not saying, no one is saying that Nazanin should have gone on her knees and said, oh, I love Liz Truss or Boris Johnson. It's not even about that. It's simply about timing of it. Being grateful as opposed to shifting the blame. Not really. It's a balance of blame, basically. We didn't really focus on blaming on Iran in that press conference. It's about timing. That was the moment that we could have actually showed a united front as citizens and the government against the Iranian regime, who was sitting there in Tehran laughing at us, watching that press conference, all of us, half the country attacking Nazanin, half the country attacking
Maya, I agree with that, actually. It was a shame she didn't go harder against the Iranian regime, which, of course, were the ones that locked her up. But you say, Maya, correct me if I'm wrong, but you think she has to take some personal responsibility because she went to Iran in the first place?
Well, I mean, I'm speaking from my personal experience, of course, because of what I went through in my family. And I know that if I go back, I'll be instantly in prison. So I'm smart enough not to go back. In terms of what to expect from a UK government or any government when you go and get stuck and get into trouble, considering the bad guys are the Iranian regime here, not the British government. And, we can sit here for 6.5 hours discussing the concept of the money, whether, some of us would disagree that, we should have given the money or not, legally speaking, and we could do that all day long. The point of it is that it's a bad precedent. You can't create, and even her husband, Richard Ratcliffe, agrees with my point that, of course, on a personal level, he would do anything to bring his wife back, but and also understands that you can't just use carrots. Sometimes you have to use carrot and sticks, and you can't keep doing this because the main reason is that you're going to put more people's lives at risk. Millions of British Iranians, but also American Iranians and millions of Iranians across the world, you're going to put all their lives at risk so that if they ever visit Iran, that they're going to get into trouble because Iran now knows that they could literally take the next person as hostage and ask for more money.
David Hay, you disagree?
Absolutely. I think the first thing that we should do is look at the facts. So in 2015, the UK government, the Foreign Office, changed the travel advisory from don't go to Iran to effectively it's fine to travel there. So Nazanin, as a young mother, effectively went with her child to her parents because the travel advisory at the time was not do not go to Iran. So she followed the government advice. So you have a British citizen following the government advice. She got there. She was arbitrarily detained and arrested. The government then changed their advice back to effectively do not travel to Iran for unless essential travel. So she followed the advice all the way along. And then she was detained for 6 years. And I think if all your viewers imagine this, detained for 6 years for something she didn't do and for a debt that the government owed Iran and didn't pay. And then eventually when that's paid, she's let go. And in between all of that, you've got the now Prime Minister, then Foreign Secretary, certainly not helping her situation by doing what Boris does best and bumbling and making inappropriate comments. So if you're her and you've just got out of 6 years of hell, you're thrust into media cameras, I think you are going to be a little bit angry. And I think it's perfectly fine for her to say what she did. And I think
I mean, Maya, when you hear it like that, perhaps she's got a right to be annoyed and to criticise the British government.
It's about, again, I understand the emotional irrationality that we all have at times, and that's all given. We're all humans. I fully get it. The problem I have, firstly, quick point, their travel advice. These are the same people who would want the government to tell them whether they should wear a mask or not. British Iranians, we know from day one, since 1979, whether the Foreign Office tell us not to go or go, that it's a risk. And
you wouldn't go, Maya?
No, even if the Foreign Office says you're allowed to go. I mean, personally, I will be instantly present, but any other kind of friend that I know that's Iranian, they know that whether the Foreign Office says go or don't go, we're not going to go. It's a bad idea. That's one thing. But I do understand David's point about in the moments when you're angry, and I get it. The problem is, if you're angry, then why is it that there's a tiny bit of focus on the fact that when you have the Labour MP been campaigning on her behalf as a local MP and others. Liz Truss, I'm not even a big fan these days of Liz Truss, but as Foreign Secretary, whether she was right or wrong to give them money, she did something. But why is it that she's hanging out with Keir Starmer and the Labour Party, but nothing? It's clearly and it's not even her fault. It's the Labour Party's fault. They're using her, taking political advantage, but using her. And that's the biggest problem. And it's Keir Starmer who's not fit for governing, because he's told us we should have paid that money years ago, instantly.
I mean, David, wasn't it wrong for Nazanin to not give at least some credit to Liz Truss? Because at the end of the day, the Foreign Secretary delivered something that the previous 4 Foreign Secretaries were unable to deliver. And whether you say this was because of diplomats or not, she made it one of her priorities from the moment that she got that job.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that, but I think the person that knows better than all of us, obviously, is Nazanin. She knows what was done by the Foreign Secretary, and when you look at what Jeremy Hunt's comments were as well, a former Foreign Secretary, he's actually agreeing with Nazanin, effectively.
Yeah, but he didn't deliver it. He didn't deliver it, and Liz Truss did.
Certainly, on the face of it, when I saw the fact that this had happened, I said, well done, Liz Truss. But then again, I don't know the exact facts, and perhaps Nazanin does more than I do. I mean, certainly under her watch, then Liz Truss has got Nazanin and the other chap out. So I think that's a positive thing. But I understand, this lady was detained for 6 years. When she left, her child was a baby, and now is a 6-year-old, and she was kept in horrific conditions in solitary confinement. I understand why she's not going to sit there and trail off like an Oscar speech of who she should thank and who she shouldn't. She's going to be angry. She's going to be upset, and I think she's justified in
Maya,
that.
she can't get those 6 years back.
That's the thing. I mean,
exactly. Neither can the family.
One issue is that, again, we've already covered the personal trauma and, in the moments and anger. I mean, what kind of competition, you could justify all that, obviously. David's tiny point that he made about only she would know about the details of the story and all that stuff and the relations between the Foreign Secretary and the Iranian government. Well, in terms of knowing the details, there's another person who also knows as much as her, and it was her husband, Richard. And Richard Ratcliffe, even he was actually acknowledging to say that, Liz Truss did something. And the whole point of it, and even she said, I disagree with you, Richard, with all due respect, I love you. And the problem is that, again, that was the one moment that we could have united. And as a country, citizens and the government, the one press conference is all about PR. Whether you like it or not, it is all a game. It's a PR game. And whether you're a human or an ordinary person or a politician, that was our time to show united front against the Iranian regime and actually use that platform to slam the Iranians. Yeah. And the next day,
but instead, we slammed ourselves. We slammed ourselves. I think it's a fair point. Well, look, fascinating debate. Thank you so much for having it. That was the British political YouTuber and son of an Iranian political refugee, Maya Tousi, and David Haig, a human rights lawyer and founder of Detained International. Thank you both. So which side are you on? Well, Woolers on Twitter says, I think the point was that she seemed angrier with the government who freed her than with the government who jailed her for 6 years. Fair point. I picked that up too, to be honest. Kev on Twitter says, the government came across at all times as if there was no urgency to her dilemma. 6 years in Iran must have felt like decades. Very fair. Julie, this is via the email. She says Nazanin needs to take responsibility for going to Iran in the first place. It's not our government's fault. It's a risky thing to do, which is the point of Maya Tousi. And your verdict is now in. 73% of you agree that Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe was wrong for criticising the government yesterday. 27% of you say it was the right thing to do. Fascinating result, that. Thank you so much for all of your feedback.